Now, we're going to talk about building in Europe and scaling up, ambition from the ground up. European founders are thinking bigger, obviously, with so much going on in the world. Trump's trade tariffs, war in Ukraine, the rush into AI, defense technology, it's all happening. But the continent, we've still got a lot of challenges. There's a lot of fragmentation. Where's our competitive edge going now? That's what we want to know. Do we need a Delaware entity? Mr. Schaefer will be telling us about that shortly. And are we about to see an influx of a bunch of Americans? Probably yes. So to unpack this, we have Konstantna, who's founder and CEO of Kaedim, Harris, who's founder of CEO of Hack the Box, and Simon Schaefer, who's from EU Inc. Now, perhaps if I can, Konstantna, if I can turn to you first. First of all, Kaedim, invented in Bristol, apparently,
correct,
in the UK,
yes,
which is fantastic. Now, let's just hear a little bit about what both of our entrepreneurs are doing first. Many of you will know what they're doing, but it'd be great to hear from them exactly what they're up to. Kaedim is really trying to be sort of like the Canva for 3D to some extent. Would you say that's the right description?
I'm not sure. I've never used that description in the past, but maybe it's a creative one. I think what we do has not been done by any other company in the past. So, but like 6 years ago, someone would say we were like even too early with that idea. But yeah, like we accelerate 3D content creation. That's kind of like the phrase I use.
Fantastic, and you came up with the idea in Bristol to model cathedrals, I think.
Yes, so yeah, I left Greece when I was 17 years old to do computer science. I landed in Bristol, a very creative city in the UK. I'm sure, Mike, you can attest to that. And by taking a lot of courses on like computer graphics, computer vision, game design, 3D modeling, I landed on like a huge problem, which is essentially how time-consuming and expensive it is to create any sort of 3D content. We started solving this problem for games. Aardman Animations are also based in Bristol, one of the biggest animation companies in the UK, and the connection was made, and the problem, I guess, was discovered.
Incredible. And now you've raised $15 million, I gather, from in a Series A from A16Z Games, obviously very large US investor. I mean, what was that conversation like? They found you on. I mean, how did they find you? That's a good question.
That's a good question. They didn't find me.
Did you go to them first?
I found them. I definitely found them. So I have raised so far 4 rounds of funding. The first 2 in Europe, mainly from angels. I never managed to actually raise an institutional round in Europe, even trying extremely hard. And then, when I went over to San Francisco, where I'm based right now, I had the chance to pitch A16Z for our seed round, which actually they didn't invest in. But then, after keeping in touch for the foreseeable 8 or 9 months, we were growing 30% month on month, every single month. They were very interested in coming on board.
Well, I want to get to that point about why you potentially with a Canva and yet had to move to San Francisco. Well, let's talk about that in a minute. But Hack the Box is a very famous, very well-respected cybersecurity company. And I was reading that you've said hiring doesn't fix broken systems; it multiplies dysfunction. And I think one of the things that you guys tried to do at Hack the Box, having now raised, I think, about $55 million so far.
Last round was $55 million from...
That was the last round?
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
In total, let's say around 60-something.
Right, I see, in total. So you're very much well on your way. I mean, you're very much trying to sort of change the culture around how companies approach cybersecurity, is that right?
Correct. Basically, what we believe is that the human is in the center of cyber. It's like a tool cannot fix your problem alone. Now with AI, we'll put a small asterisk on that, but up to now. And the common example I use is that buying a Ferrari doesn't make you a good driver. You need to have a proper operator, and that's where we focus. We focus on the operator, and we give them the mental tools to be able to operate properly and deflect threats or identify threats quite early in time.
Right, I see. Would you say that you're is an obvious competitor to you guys and what you're doing, or do you feel like you're kind of alone out there in the market?
We started alone because the way we deliver training is was quite different to what the market standard was. Now many companies popped up and many large organizations that were there before us adapted the way they deliver training towards what we do. So there is competition, but we are mostly winning.
And how are you leveraging your Greek heritage and talent to compete in the market?
Well, in Greece we have amazing technical talent.
Yeah.
We have amazing developers. We have a lot of hackers. What I'm saying is that many Greeks are hackers and they don't know about it. We use hackers because we create the content to train.
Yeah.
Because of the way we...
So sort of red teaming and blue teaming, red teaming.
Yeah. We do both.
Yeah.
We do both red teaming, we do both blue teaming. We believe that you need to understand how the cyber criminal operates to be able to identify them. So we teach you how to hack a system.
Right.
And then we teach you how to defend it, so you have a full view of the cybersecurity landscape.
Right. Well, we've got two examples of clearly very successful European companies emerging out of Greece and out of Greek culture and Greek heritage and Greek talent. But the EU Inc. project, Simon, which you are co-conspirating with, is the idea behind is going to be to create a sort of a new overall company structure for Europe and for the EU, specifically for the EU, obviously, which would help companies potentially attract investors faster or certainly sort of make the whole thing a lot simpler. I'm afraid a bit of a skeptic because there are a lot of initiatives in the EU which seem to kind of run into the sand and you never hear about them ever again. Why do you think you guys are going to be different, and what do you think this is really going to be sort of a magic bullet?
Oh, wow, big question. I would start with that essentially all of our corporate law in the world is older than the internet. So how is that supposed to regulate innovation, right? I mean, that's a very obvious low-hanging fruit that makes no sense. Secondly, we want to tap a 450 million people internal market in the EU. How are we supposed to do that with 27 different regulations for conducting business? I think that's also extremely obvious. I think what has changed in the European Commission is that with a very technological-driven war at our border and the invasion of Ukraine, and with the competitiveness report by Mario Draghi and the report that there is essentially no digital single market by Enrico Letta, finally there's a political prerogative that's a priority that says this is not a nice to have, this is an absolute must have. And we believe that we're approaching it a bit different than usually policy is being approached. We've provided a blueprint, we've provided with law offices that work across Europe a plan on how to actually do that. And I don't know, normally concepts in policy are paper tigers, and we're trying to do it different. We're trying to productize a policy there.
I suppose also you raised a petition. How many people signed the petition?
15,000 people in the first few weeks.
And those were entrepreneurs or?
Almost exclusively VCs and entrepreneurs, yes.
So you have VC backing as well. So I think, to what extent do you feel that having that sort of political democratic, here we are in the place where democracy was invented, having that democratic validation from the industry itself is going to help the technocrats and the EU politicians to back such a project?
Absolutely essential. I think the mandate and the credibility comes from the startup community. Without that, it's not going to happen, it's not going to be meaningful. I would go one step further. I think there's a sensational knowledge gap from politics to actual entrepreneurs, because very few entrepreneurs actually go into politics. I think your prime minister is a huge difference, right? I mean, his background that he mentioned today, he's from VC, so wow, kudos to that, and I think you can feel that. I've seen GovGR, significantly different. I mean, it's almost on the level of the Estonian digitalization of government, so it all starts there. You need people knowledgeable about technology and business to write the regulation. And I think that's a vibe shift that's happening now, and it's way overdue.
So if you're in business, get involved in politics, I suppose, sounds like the message. Both of you, obviously entrepreneurs emerging from Greece and from Europe, do you think any of that kind of approach would have made a difference to how you started your companies, Konstantna?
Yeah, that's a hard question to answer. I guess for me, as like a very young person trying to fundraise in Europe, like I was 21 years old trying to persuade people that I have an idea that it's gonna work. That never happened for me. Like, would it happen today? I mean, obviously, Simon wasn't around back then, so I hope more people like Simon can like spend a lot of time to find these entrepreneurs or like grow, like get the word out that this exists. But I think in general, as I think Apostolakis said earlier, the thing that I see lacking the most is like this fire and ambition. And I think how we can actually create this is like when successful people come back and say, hey, if we can do it, everyone here in this room can also do it. Because as the Prime Minister said earlier as well, like 20, 30 years ago, what we had or what I had like 5 years ago, obviously, is a luxury, right? I know like my dad is also an entrepreneur. 30 years ago, he had no like minus support in Greece as a Greek person. So I think we definitely need to be appreciative of all the opportunities that nowadays, founders have. And I think more people need to take the risk and like have the ambition to try, not give up. Because I think in our era, it's literally a matter of not giving up. I pitched hundreds of European investors, and I still didn't give up. I heard like all the reasons why my startup is gonna fail and not be successful. I still not give up, and now we're backed by A16Z in Silicon Valley. So yeah, I think that's all that matters at the end of the day.
Right. So to some extent, the sort of regulatory aspect of it is not really compared to anything to the actual grit you have to have as an entrepreneur to keep going, really.
100%. And Europe needs to take more risks, right?
But presumably you wouldn't want to be in Germany where the notary has to sit down and read out 30,000 words of a contract. And I think, Simon, that's kind of what you're butting up against. Is that right?
That and many other things. I mean, insolvency law is ridiculous.
Right.
If you look at the statistics commonly known, 9 out of 10 companies fail. Yet everything we start with, we don't anticipate that potential in failure. Everything is supposed to succeed from a legislative environment. And that's, of course, not making any sense. But I think the first thing I said, corporate law is older than the economy is trying to regulate. That's the incredible part. We need to realize that there's a systemic approach in creating companies, and that's very much an American approach we brought to Europe, whichever way that is. But we are in a position now to actually design the better framework, because even the US is sleeping on it. It's a terrible framework. Delaware is not a good framework to work in. It's really difficult, and it's a paper tiger as well. So why not create the best environment in Europe to fund, and scale a company?
Right. What, Harris, do you think that you would have, if you'd done things differently or the history had worked out differently, that you would have would you have created Hack the Box without Europe? If you'd been an American, for instance, or started somewhere else?
The fact that I created Hack the Box was, all of my experience led me to that. Now, I can't possibly say that if I was in the US, I wouldn't have created Hack the Box, nor that I would have created. I think some things are meant to happen, and they happen from wherever you are in the world.
Right. Well, fair enough. It's about who you are. One of the things that we are very proud of in Europe is our talent. Because our universities are still, thankfully, believe in things like vaccines and the truth. What do you think about the idea that we are probably too much of an incubator for other bigger markets like the US? What's one of the problems I've seen, for instance, let me take an example. In Portugal, there was a big boom about maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago, and everyone suddenly was in Lisbon doing startups in Lisbon. And then Microsoft comes along and Google comes along and goes, hello, there's plenty of talent here, we'll have some of this. And all of a sudden, you as a smaller country in Europe are suddenly having to compete for salaries. If you're trying to do a startup, create a startup ecosystem, you're suddenly having to compete with salaries which are, astronomical. What are your thoughts about competing with those kinds of competitors?
I don't think you can. If you compete only on the salary, it's a lost game. You compete on the vision. You compete on the speed. I mean, a startup moves fast. Some people want to move fast. They cannot stand an organization where you can, just have an idea and wait 3 months to go through the entire process to deliver it. In Greece, and I think in Europe in general, the smaller the company is, the faster it moves. You follow the vision, you follow the founder and what you're trying to achieve, and that's how you win talent. You don't win talent on salary alone.
So how important is culture, for instance? What sort of culture are you trying to envisage?
I'm not sure you want to ask this question. Our culture is notorious. But I totally agree. I think you're not competing with Google until you're extremely large size and in the early stage. You actually want the people that believe in this mission, that are prepared to pour sweat and tears and go through highs and lows and very hard circumstances with the founder in the journey. And then I think culture is extremely important. I think culture at the very early stage startups should almost be like a cult. There should be a common set of values that is followed by every single person. Extreme hardworking environment. I believe that nothing extremely great can be achieved without a great amount of a lot of hard work and sacrifices and perseverance and whatever comes with that, and sweat and tears. And so it's about a small group of people who are prepared to go through all of that to do something big.
Do you think, Simon, that the EU Inc. project and somebody called it the 28th regime, which I think is a bit rather boring name.
Both are bad.
Both are not great, but we'll come up with something. Do you think that that whatever you want to call it, the EU Inc. project, the Delaware for Europe company structure, and also all the other stuff like raising money faster, etc., drag and drop digitalization of company creation in Europe, do you think that will help with the talent war against big tech?
Yes, absolutely. I think that one thing we need to consider is that it's a bit like an infrastructural component for the innovation economy, right? And it's really funny how in Europe we've managed to talk ourselves as small as possible. It's like every member state still thinks member state. And this goes not only for talent, salaries, this goes as far as the fund sizes of the investors. I mean, some of them are directly proportional to the home market that they're active in. And that's a challenge we need to break up, because if we don't want companies to go to the US, if we want trillion euro companies in Europe, then there's this common playing grounds that we need to create in this one field of activity. We don't have that yet. We think the EU Inc. or the 28th regime is a segue into doing that, and it's a starting point. There's ESOP, employee stock option programs, there's insolvency law, there's labor law, cross-border hiring. All these things can be built on top of an infrastructure, but that infrastructure is not there yet.
Can I add something? I think when we're talking about talent and young people, it also matters whether they consider it cool working in a startup, right? Because, for example, I interview Greek people, they might not even know what stock options are, to your point, right? So if they're not aware of how they can tie their success with actually the company's success that they're working for, and they've never heard anyone in their environment actually kind of owning shares, owning stock options, kind of having this big success with a startup, then it's very hard to imagine. So yeah, that goes back to Sean.
Right, my organisers might hate me for a second because I might go over time by 30 seconds, but I'm just going to ask one quick fire round question for all of you. We all know that China in the last 2 or 3 months instituted a new law that said all 6-year-olds must learn AI from year 6 upwards. In Europe and in the UK, often we are having a debate about banning smartphones from schools and banning technology because kids are too obsessed with TikTok or something else. What do you think? Should we teach kids AI from age 6? Simon, yes or no? And one sentence.
Yes, absolutely. But to understand it, we need digital literacy in both using it and also in entrepreneurship. And yes, that starts in school.
Okay, Konstantna.
I think we should teach them ambition and thinking for themselves before we teach them about AI, because if they have ambition and if they can think for themselves, then they can choose to learn AI or even build the new AI 20 years from now.
Fair comment.
I think we should teach them more technology in general, whether that's AI or cybersecurity. You need to be technologically literate from a very young age, because that will give you a head start in innovating in the future. And I think we are way back in that.
You think we're
We are
behind?
way back, yeah, but I'm against enforcing anything to a kid. So learn AI because I say so, okay? I want to give options. I would prefer to give the option.
Hands up in the audience, who thinks kids from age 6 should be taught AI? Put your hand up, yes? Put your hand up, no. Majority, no. China wins, everyone. I'm joking, of course. Thank you very much to our panel. Thank you very much.